Hi folks, thanks for joining. It is the 19th of May and this is the Customer Success Architect Office Hours session. We have a couple of people joined as guests today. Priyanka, hi Timmy again, nice to see you. Hey Donald. My fellow architects we have on live today is Asaf, Zachary, Akeem, Demarcus, Prasanna and Rick. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. What I will do as normal is I will dive into the release notes, just see what's come out since the last time we chatted, maybe have a little bit of a conversation about them. And then there's a topic I wouldn't mind going over with you guys a bit later on. We discussed it internally the other day, but I think it'd be useful to talk about with some of the people online and catch it on YouTube later on. So without further ado, let's take a look. Now, a much asked for feature has come live, and that is the 2-node that's in preview right now. So what this enables you to do is to deploy 2-node cluster rather than scaling straight from a 1-node test up to a 3-node. This is in preview right now, as I say, and it gives you kind of greater stability than the 1-node, which is limited to 30 days and has no failures to tolerate. So this is kind of a greater availability level, dip your toe in the cloud water, shall we say, and gives you the just more realistic platform to play with. Any thoughts on this, guys and gals that are on the line?
Yeah, the bit where this is not covered under SLA, I think that's quite important.
Yeah, it's a good shout.
While it's in preview, that's, I mean, it will, the goal is to have it covered by SLA, but not at the moment while it's only in preview. So it's not for production use yet, which is really important.
Yeah, good shout. So that goes back to the dipping your toe in the cloud water, I guess. Just gives you that sort of slightly larger environment to play with, possibly play with some of the other features that you can't get in a 1-node. It's relatively straightforward. It's twice as big as a 1-node and not production certified. I guess the bigger thing for me, rather than the 2-node, is the automatic adjustment of the vSAN policies. This has caused some headaches for some people in the past. Now, we've discussed this a number of times in the past about remembering to keep on top of your vSAN policies as you scale beyond 5 and 6 nodes, to make sure that you remain SLA compliant, and by that I mean eligible to claim credits if there's an outage and you have a compliant vSAN storage policy. So one of the things that the BU have looked at doing for a while and are starting to roll out now is the automatic change of the default policy. So the default policy will change once you go beyond 6 nodes. It will change to the FTT number to 6 for RAID 6, and then also on stretch clusters, it actually makes it slightly better on stretch clusters. It means that you don't have to have FTT equals 2 anymore on stretch, which was quite costly, so long as you have dual site mirroring enabled. Now, there is a little bit of ambiguity in the documentation that comes with this, so we're hoping to get that updated. But it does basically say that to maintain SLA compliance, you have to have this policy or better, and it's basically exactly this policy. So if you had, for example, dual site mirroring and FTT equals 2, if you really wanted that, you are still SLA compliant because you have the same policy or better. Gents, any thoughts on this one at all?
Yeah, I would say this one's pretty controversial.
Yeah.
Just because it simply can end up increasing the amount of storage that you consume as soon as you add hosts. I guess one of my other big questions about this feature is, especially on the stretch cluster side of the house, you know, you get to 6 hosts, 8 hosts, and then I think 12 hosts. You can actually increase the policy even beyond. It looks like this will just stick it to dual site mirroring in RAID 1. I'd be kind of a little bit cautious about being able to add nodes because the RAID policy gets shifted, and then all of a sudden you're using more storage than you had planned for previously. Do we know automatically, does it sort of take that into consideration if you're going from, let's say, 5 hosts to 6 and you're switching the policy, if more storage is going to be consumed, does it warn you or allow you not to do that?
I don't think it warns you. I think, and don't forget, this is only attributed against the default storage policy, right? So a lot of customers in their environments, the bigger they get, they have multiple storage policies for different use cases, such as, databases and other such workloads. So it's not every policy that's going to change. So you can, and it's worth pointing out again that you can have any storage policy you want, and you will be supported from a VMware standpoint. You won't be eligible for SLA credits if you are running with a different storage policy, but just the same as on-prem, you are. Sorry.
One thing to point, it's not a different storage policy. The important there is the FTT. So for example, if you're over 6 hosts and you're running, for example, your databases with mirroring, but FTT of 2, you will still be supported and still under SLA. It's just if you will do an FTT 1 that you won't be under SLA.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I'm saying is you have to have the same, you have to have exactly the same or better from a resilience perspective to be SLA credit eligible, but you will always be supported. So just because you're not using an SLA credit eligible policy, you're still supported. I guess that's the point I was making.
So I think architecturally, it makes sense to create your own policy and then switch all your VMs to that policy. Do we know if there's the default policy inside the SDDC. Is it keying off the name of the actual default policy, or is it keying off of what is set as the default policy for the SDDC?
Good shout. It is the default. It is the default policy, the one that's auto created. I don't know how it references that, but I imagine there's some kind of tally up in the background, whether it's the name or something, I don't know. But so for a long time, we've recommended people use custom or their own created policies, right, to give them that different sort of flexibility against different use cases, and not change the default storage policy. So the default storage policy is the one that will get changed. There are people that run just against the default storage policy, and that's either fine for them or they just haven't looked into it and done any work around it. But we can only obviously manage so much, and there's no way that I think that anybody, especially the BU, would want to go in there and set every policy as a minimum and change custom created policies.
Sure, and the reason I kind of point that out is just to architecturally try to understand, if you're not a super fan of the default policy being adjusted for you in your SDDC, right? A simple workaround is for you to create your own policy and set that as the default for all the VM creation.
No, makes sense. From my discussions, they refer to it as the default managed policy.
That makes sense.
I guess that is the one that is the default created, the initial default created, and then is managed now by us. So this, what is interesting as well is that this will scale back down as well. I don't know. That's actually a good question. I don't know. Any of you have seen an SDDC scale back down? Has anyone seen that at all?
No.
It's highly unlikely, right? Based on the fact that all 3 metrics have to be met, and storage is set as low as 20%, I think.
It's got to be super low.
Yeah. But to be fair, this will auto scale back in as well. So you won't, I guess it has to, because it can't maintain RAID 6 so if you're only running 3 nodes or whatever. So
it's actually a good point for the 2-node cluster, is you can't scale from a 3-node down to a 2-node cluster.
Yeah, good chat.
I thought that was super interesting architecturally, that you have to really keep an eye on your storage, because the default EDRS storage policy will kick you up to 3 hosts if you start consuming too much.
Yeah. So yeah, once you get to beyond 75%, it's going to kick you up. So yeah, good shout actually. Yeah. So any other kind of thoughts on the vSAN policies at all there?
Yeah, also on the concern raised by Akeem, so this is an opt-in policy, right? So customer can choose whether they want this feature or they can just stick with their own policies.
So
it's not like they're forced.
So in the future, so this is in preview right now, and they've picked 10 large customers to go out and trial this with. This will be rolled out, so the default managed policy will be changed for everybody in the future. But you can, as you say, you can just attribute a different vSAN policy against your VMs, and then this will make no odds. This will make no difference to you whatsoever.
Okay.
So if people follow the advice that we give and they do set machines against their own policies so that they're not editing the default policy, then it won't actually make any difference to anybody. However, for those folks that have grown and then had everything at the default storage policy and not changed anything, this is going to impact you. So I'm hoping that there's going to be quite a bit of notification and warning that goes out for this, because I can imagine that there are quite a few people that are still running on the wrong storage policy, and that changing this is going to impact them potentially negatively up front. So we've seen in the past, I can't remember which was a big US customer who changed. They basically had everything running under one storage policy, and they just changed it for everything. So there was a mass impact to performance on vSAN. Took some workloads offline, I think. So yeah, bit of a worry for those people that haven't sort of actively managed this in the past. Cool. And the only other update I see on here is there was an issue that's been resolved where the NSX load balancer didn't fail over or took as much as 30 seconds to complete. So yeah, small fix, but a good one. So actually the vSAN policy stuff leads into the other discussion that we were having internally the other day about what were you talking about the other day? We were talking about stretch clusters, weren't we? And sadly in our lab, we don't have a stretch cluster, so I can't really demo anything. But it's definitely an interesting conversation to have. So I'd like some sort of some round robin discussion on this. It'd be quite good. So we used to charge for the stretch cluster feature, which we no longer charge for. And there's a number of reasons we used to charge, but we've come to an agreement now with AWS because there was kind of egress charging happening between those AZs. So we are no longer really charging for that data between the two. Or if we do, it's such a small amount, right?
Yeah, I think it's a
It's
fraction
only
of
been
what
reduced.
it used to be.
Yeah, it's gone down to like 100th or something of the cost of what it used to be. The other interesting conversation that we were having and that sparked the one we had internally off was there's a bit of uncertainty, I think, around what happens with workloads and how much you need to reserve in case of failure from a CPU and memory perspective. Now, when you deploy a workload, if you deploy at the cluster level, there's an algorithm that will run and it will place it on any random host on that stretch cluster, right? So you don't really have any element of control at that point. The only way to control which side of the stretch that you're deploying to is to deploy against a host, right? So not at a cluster against a host. But then you've very little control then about what happens to that workload once you have deployed it, because it may get vMotioned around, it may start running off a different host in a different side of the stretch, right? So there are some mechanisms, should we call them, for managing this, but it's not clean right now. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about the ways we could control this, or I can start us off.
Use host affinities.
Yeah. Good point. So how does host affinity work in VMC, Zach?
The same as it does. I don't. I guess you create groups and you can make these rules where you can say these VMs should run on this host.
Yeah.
Or group of hosts when possible.
Yeah. So we let me just Open vCenter. Timmy just had a question. Asaf, if you could just clarify while I open this, that'd be grand. So
Yes,
Timmy,
of
you
course.
said, can I clarify the statement about charges for stretched cluster across AZ?
Yes, and I also sent you sent a link if you want to share that. So basically, when we have a stretch cluster, we have two sides of a vSAN clusters in multiple AZs, in 2 AZs, and actually in 3 AZs if we take into account the witness node. That's very little traffic, but that's still traffic. And with AWS, every traffic that goes between outside of an AZ, basically there's incurred traffic, and I believe it's about 2 cents a gig by default. And we have recently, as the blog post says, in late last year, in last year's VMworld, we announced that we're discounting it to 95%, 95% of the cost. So right now it's it states there exactly, but I believe it's a couple of cents for 100 gig. Yeah, 10 cents for 100 gig. Yeah. So the traffic there is significantly lower, and that is even less of a cost than doing, for example, 2 SDDCs in 2 different regions with SRM, with 2 different AZs with SRM traffic going between them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was definitely a blocker, a reason for some people to not deploy stretch clusters.
Yeah,
and yeah. So yeah. Timmy, you've said, do you know there is no AWS charge over the ENI in the same zone? Correct, but that doesn't really apply here, Timmy, where we're talking about stretching 2 sides of vSAN between different AZs. But yeah, you're correct. There is no charge for traffic that goes over that ENI to the linked VPC. Yes, exactly. So sorry. So what I was going to do is I was just going to show you the policies. We were talking policies, weren't we? And host profiles. So
good policy.
Sorry, it wasn't host profiles, was it?
Compute policies.
Yes, there we go. Thank you very much.
Before we go to the compute policy, there is also a storage policy aspect to this, so which decides where we want to place the data.
Yep.
So we could potentially create policies which pins the data to preferred AZ or a second AZ. Yeah, let's enable that. And
yeah, don't bother about that. Let's just encrypt it. There we go. Right. So
yeah, there. In the first dropdown.
Sorry. So yeah, stretched cluster and preferred and non-preferred.
Yeah, the third and fourth option. So that basically helps us pin the data to a specific AZ. But this covers only the data aspect of it. But as you mentioned, absolutely, the VM's compute might move over and run on the second AZ, but the data still resides on the first AZ. So exactly, that is where the compute policies could come into play. And yeah, we can move on to the compute policy.
So what this goes back as well. Sorry to just cut you off there. This goes back to the SLA compliance of vSAN policies as well, right? So if you are stretched and you don't have dual side mirroring picked, you are then non-compliant for that policy.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to jump in. This is Akeem again. Does anyone have a really good use case for either data on preferred or data on non-preferred, and why a customer would want to use that?
Yeah, it's especially useful for servers with inbuilt HA capability. Now, let's say an Active Directory domain controller. So they already sync with each other and they are already highly available. So it doesn't make sense to again protect them with a dual site mirroring, or even a SQL database cluster with always on sync going on. So in those cases, they could potentially place the primary node on first AZ and a secondary node on a second AZ, and just not apply a dual site mirroring.
Fantastic. So generically at the application layer, if you're replicating the data and you want to maintain availability in the case of an AZ failure, you might not choose dual site mirroring in a stretch cluster and then use and pin the VMs to one side of the AZ or another.
Yeah,
fantastic
exactly.
use case.
So we have in the telco world, they're very risk averse, and I have a telco customer who has an obscene level of resilience baked in using this. So they actually have two SDDCs that both of them are stretched, and one runs workload. So SDDC 1 and SDDC 2, and SDDC 2 runs application level load balanced traffic for SDDC 1, and then they pin to a specific AZ as well. So they're making sure that out of the two SDDCs, they don't have the the application resilient workloads both running in the same AZ, if that makes sense. So they've got untold, it's expensive, but untold levels of resilience to their application layer.
Yep.
Cool. Sorry, so yeah, back into compute policies. So yeah, you can create, host affinity as you do on-prem. Can you think of any issues with, or any differences, I guess, in VMC over on-prem, for example?
Yeah, the cluster level settings are not available in VMC.
The what, sorry?
The cluster level settings are not available for modification.
Yeah. Yep. Also, we have the problem where, well, a customer has the advantage that the environment is managed for them. Therefore, if they are creating host affinity policies and they are doing it based on VMs to hosts, and the hosts themselves change because they're being managed under maintenance. Are these covered? How do we pick these up? So how are we adding hosts to a policy?
Yeah, using tags.
Yep. So it's my understanding, I don't think tags are automatically added. And they're certainly not automatically added when an environment scales either. So we have to, it's another level of management. So we have to go back in and make sure our policies are updated as we scale. So you could, I guess, end up in a situation where one person creates a compute policy to pin VMs to one side of the stretch, and then somebody else adds hosts, or the autoscaler kicks in add hosts, and they're not then part of the compute policy. So they're going to either have unused compute, or yeah, I guess unused compute per side of the stretch. Anything else? Anything else we can see that would be a challenge on this one?
Yeah, I think there is a scope for automation with this.
Yeah, you could run, you could do it at any level, really, couldn't you? You could run something serverless, or you could run like a function as a service to keep checking, or you could just go in and run a daily task to update the policies as new hosts are added.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Cool. Right. So anything else on stretched clusters that we need to be aware of or conscious of? I'm not sure that I can think of anything off the top of my head. Certainly nothing that we discussed the other day, I don't think. Okay, any questions out on chat? Timmy or Priyanka, Donald, or Noah? Hi, Noah. Somebody, Donald, you unmuted there.
Yeah. Well, just a quick one. So you mentioned at the start of the call with the two nodes coming out. Is there plans to deprecate the one node? Is that once the two node is, I suppose, goes GA? And I suppose, is there further information around that?
Good shout, actually. I haven't heard of any plans. I don't know if any of the rest of the architects have. To my awareness, the one node is going to stay for as long as it's required.
Yeah, I mean, one node is just for the 30-day POC. Two node eventually will be essentially
Default,
production level. So it doesn't have that 30-day expiry, so it's not really an equivalency.
I think it's how we position it then as well. Like,
Sorry, I thought I heard from some angle that the one node was going to be deprecated once the two node had come in, that customers would be recommended to go to the two node. So I'm not sure where I picked that up from. So, thanks for clarifying that.
And that's good shout. I'll do some checking, Donal, and see. But yeah, I think as Zach says, it's a different kind of use case. So one is for that POC, that 30 days. You can obviously scale both of them up, but kind of different use case. I'll take a note to check that with the BU, and then I'll add some notes to the either next call or the YouTube.
There's no great ask in either. It's more
Thanks,
the allowing.
Thanks. Cool. Timmy, any further questions from you at all, mate?
No, not from me. I think someone has already asked what was going to be about the two node. Is that production ready now? Can that be can that be used for production workloads?
Yeah, so not currently, but it's the plan is to make it a productionized platform. The problem obviously in creating a two node is where that witness host was going to run. So there's always been, I mean, there's that for starters, but also some technical challenges in AWS. But as far as Zach was saying, it's definitely going to be a production platform. Do you, Asaf or Zach, do you have any sort of ideas on timings or?
No, because I read somewhere that basically they weren't supporting stretch clustering on the two node solution. Is that still?
Oh yes, because you'd have to scale symmetrically, so you'd end up it would effectively be a four node. So you're not going to have one node on either side of a stretch. So that's not going to happen.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you for that, Timmy. Right. If there are I'm just checking all the chat panels. No Q&As come through. If there are none right now, we'll just do a bit of a roundtable, have a catch up, see what people have been working on. I know there's been an interesting couple of HCX issues out there that are under discussion at the moment. But I will start with Asaf today, and we'll work down alphabetically. So, Asaf, mate, what have you been looking at? What have you been working on?
Just some usual things. Nothing. Nothing out of the ordinary. I have a couple of customers looking into integrating more and more VDI workloads and spinning up more VDI clusters in addition to, VDI SDDCs, I will say, in addition to general servers. Some customers with migrations going on with HCX, expecting a new release coming out soon to fix and enhance some capabilities, but that's pretty much it. Yep.
Cool. So, what are the expected capabilities or enhancements that are coming out?
It's actually more. I think in the next release, it's going to be a bit more fixing some issues that customer is specifically experiencing about timing, specifically in pulling information from vCenter. That customer has a lot of VMs, and sometimes it causes some inconsistencies in the UI between what HCX is seeing and what vCenter is seeing. So that's something that we're kind of looking forward to.
Okay, so they're going to update the frequency of the polls, or
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. Thanks for that. Useful to know. Do you know what sort of what kind of frequency they are now and what they're hoping to move to, or is it?
No, I don't have exactly the details for that yet.
No worries. Okay, cool. Thank you, Saf. Akeem, anything you've been working on of late that's been interesting or of note?
Yeah, I don't know if we've ever covered it before, but if you don't mind me sharing my screen, I want to look at some day 2 ops vRealize log insight related items.
Yes, do it.
So this should be coming through. I'm actually logged into vRealize Log Insight Cloud.
Yeah.
So one of my customers has been trying to operationalize the VMC platform, and those day 2 operations questions around what do I do in the event of X and becoming super popular when it comes to our conversations on a weekly basis. And one of those is related to the vRealize Log Insight Cloud. So this customer happens to use Splunk, and the way to get the logs off of the cloud side is to use the cloud proxy on premise. And one of the problems with the cloud proxy today is it's not highly available, right? There is no failover mechanism for it. And so the question is, great, how do I monitor it? How do I make sure that it stays up and running? And what do I do in the case of it not processing the way that it's supposed to? Where that becomes more of a concern is on the operation and security side when you start missing log ingestion, right? So if you stop collecting any of those logs or you forget about it for days on end, you can actually lose some of those logs that might put your business at risk. So one thing I've actually written up a long Word document about this, but over here on the configuration in the system alerts, I forget the defaults for all these different items around, right, the cloud proxy itself dropping logs, failure to forward the logs, inactive cloud proxies. You definitely want to go turn all these items on and then either subscribe your operations teams to the email list here or create a webhook. In this case, you could push it into Slack or some other endpoint if you want. So start there. And then the other non-obvious place to look is actually in cloud proxies itself. And of course, when you live demo,
it logs you out.
It logs you out. Here we're looking at an on-premise vCenter that has a log proxy that's been hooked up. It was created in January. Here, there's actually a configure notifications button that allows far more granularity than a lot of platforms in the cloud for how often it's going to spam your inbox in case something is down. So if the cloud proxy goes inactive for more than 30 minutes, it will literally spam you every 10 minutes, telling you that it's down. So I think the ability to go in and set that to whatever's comfortable for your business, I think is super important. Same thing with notifications of updates. If a customer is highly secure on-prem and you might use like a reverse proxy, you might want to go through a couple of upgrades manually. So coming back into this UI and manually upgrade, but it'll tell you, hey, look, there's a new update, and hey, let me know every 10 minutes or every hour, however many days, to go ahead and do that upgrade when appropriate. And then if any of the proxies are unhealthy, it'll actually set that for you as well.
So what's just briefly on the inactive status? What's it using? Is it a heartbeat? Is it a ping? What's it using to check if something's up and available?
Yeah, essentially, yeah, you're right on the money there. It's essentially a heartbeat with a ping back on premise. So the cloud side actually knows and can reach the cloud proxy. And I imagine it's probably implemented in the reverse, since these are private IPs, meaning the cloud proxy, once it's been registered, it reaches out to the cloud side.
Yeah.
Right? And so if it stops sending updates to the cloud side, it knows that it's essentially gone inactive and something has gone wrong. There are some pretty neat diagnostic tools in this side. So the ability to remotely reboot that machine if you needed to. You can upload a support bundle, check for upgrades manually, check the status of the appliance, and you can restart it as well if you need. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's cool.
Sweet.
Thank you.
So,
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, mate.
No, you're good. You're good. I know it's not the most exciting or interesting part of the VMC platform by any means, but I'm noticing more and more as customers are more comfortable with the basic idea of vSphere in the cloud, that the day 2 operations piece has become more of a challenge. I thought this was a really cool way to allow you to at least keep an eye on that cloud proxy for customers who are using it and making sure that their operations teams get alerted if something's wrong with it or it stops ingesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, this is Timmy. The log insight services, is it hosted all over all over the globe. For example, I work for the MOD, and if they wanted to use this type of service, they won't want their data out of the UK. So is that service hosted in the UK?
So Timmy, funnily enough, I know you because I also work on that MOD account. But we've had the conversation. As it stands at the moment, all logs are shipped to the US, but they're all shipped to the US for the service itself. So even if you didn't activate and use Log Insight yourself, your logs in the back end that we use to support the service all get shipped to the US as well. So we've this is an important thing that we bring up with everybody when we do those initial sort of kickoff and early discussions about potential hurdles that we have to overcome. So obviously something like that, it's much more important to bring up on day one rather than hope it goes unnoticed and then it hit us later on. So absolutely all logs are shipped to the US. There are talks and plans for regionalized log services, but at the moment we don't know how granular those regional log services will be, and by that I mean we don't know if it will be, you know, one for EMEA, and in EMEA it could be in Germany, or it could be in Spain, or it could be, you know, or it could be in the UK, and we don't know for APJ where it would be either. So they're still kind of up in the air. But I believe the management aspects of the logs required for the SRE engineers in the background to manage the platform, they're always going to be shipped to the US for now anyway as well. So even if there was a local Log Insight service for you, correct me if I'm wrong, gents, the rest of you, but as far as I'm aware, that's the current plan anyway. So even if there's a customer side, at the moment it's still going to be US backed.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, but I'm sure that it's not only the MOD that is requiring this.
Yeah.
For example, if it's selling to financial institutions and so on, because of the regulatory requirement of financial institutions and so on, they might require that basically they don't want any of their data outside their region, you know, as so to speak. So is there any plan in future to have one say in the UK and one say in EMEA?
Yeah, sorry. So just to be clear, I think that's what I was saying before, is that there are plans to regionalize the log collection distribution side of things. However, those plans haven't been firmed up. So what we don't know, even us internally, what we don't know at the moment is whether they will be country specific, which I doubt in the first instance. If they are geo dispersed, there will probably be an EMEA one and an APAC one and keep the American ones. And then we don't know where they will be placed anyway. So for example, if you are a German company with very strict regulatory compliance that regulations that you have to be compliant with, it's unlikely that even if it was an EMEA, something that was just out of the US would be good enough. It would more likely have to be Germany based. Rick, I'm sure you can back me up on that one. But so I don't know if in the first issue, I don't think we're going to answer everybody's requests, basically is what I'm saying, Timmy. So yeah, there are plans afoot, but I don't have any time frame or any real detail because I don't think those decisions have been made yet.
Yeah, and in addition to that, since you've mentioned Germany, so most of the logs we are, shipping here back to the US is mostly telemetry data anyway, which is mostly used for us to keep the service up and running and to see if there are any issues on the service itself. Do we see any errors? Also, sometimes, when there's some misbehavior sort of on some networking components to see, hey, is there maybe an attack or something? This is certainly something we are looking into. And I reckon that this is going to be shipped further on into the US. And yeah, as Will stated, there is thoughts about having stuff locally, but how granular is a different story. And since you've mentioned the financial sector to me, there is talks and plans to have, further certifications like PCI DSS and stuff like that. We don't have it today. It is in the works. And based on that, I reckon that, even financial services institutions, have more benefit on that, and they know even better what's happening with the data. And what I would also, talk about, and I forwarded to you, Will, already, but we have this security assessment document online with CSTAR, with the Cloud Security Alliance. And this, for example, is something which is also important. So most of our services which are online, if not all, are being self-evaluated jointly with the CSA. And especially for VMware Cloud and AWS, if you scroll a bit down, there you can see that it is just recently being updated on April 6th. And since I'm talking to a lot of customers having sort of concerns, or they're new to cloud, and I'm located in Germany, and German customers tend to be very data driven in regards to, we need to have everything in Germany, and you can sort of seize their pain by providing this document, so they know, okay, this is happening with my data, and how we're dealing with it. And this is, I reckon, the first step, but certainly, as you've mentioned, Timmy, it is pretty much needed in the future by so many customers to have all that data locally.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. All good points.
Thank you, Rick.
No worries.
Yeah,
anytime.
It's I mean, it's a request that I guess all of us made, or a question we asked when we all joined the VMware Cloud on AWS team is why are the logs all in the US? And it's the same with a number of the products. And I guess initially that's because that's where the service started, right? And it's still growing, it's still expanding. So hopefully the panacea, the desired outcome will be log services that are local to your to your deployment, and then therefore you pick the region that you want to deploy in, and hopefully log services and other supporting services are also in the same region. But yeah, we're not there yet, I'm afraid. Cool. Akeem, did you have anything else about Log Insight at all that you wanted to show?
No, that was pretty much it. If anyone's interested in the document I created, reach out to me about that.
Yeah,
I actually have email examples of what shows up in your inbox and all that other fun stuff for operations teams.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be useful. Thank you. DeMarcus, hello, sir.
Hey, how you doing, Will?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it's, I don't really have anything to report this week. Just working with a customer right now to, we onboarded last week, and right now we're going through deploying the vCenter Cloud Gateway.
Yep.
We are running into a couple of issues with certificates, but other than that, everything's going fine.
Cool, good to know. So if you, what would be useful in the future then, DeMarcus, can I ask you to just capture those sort of issues you've hit with the vCenter Cloud Gateway, and maybe talk about them on the next call, and then we can share the learning there.
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic, thank you. Prasanna, you're up, matey. What have you been looking at?
Yeah, I guess just the usual topics we already discuss in these calls. So nothing that jumped out. Maybe I'll reiterate the BGP subnet limit over the direct connect.
Seems to come up quite a few calls.
Quite often, yeah. So yeah, we currently have a soft limit of 16 subnets, which will be allowed over the BGP direct connect by default. And this is a soft limit, and we can increase it up to 100. But yeah, this request has to be raised against AWS, and it takes its own time. So something to be aware of in sizing the compute networks. So let's say if you have plans to break up the subnets into pretty small subnets like /28s or /29s, then this limit is something you need to think about, because if you're breaking it too small, then you can easily hit the hard limit of 100. So
Yeah, thanks for that. So it's worth pointing out as well that the 100 hard limit of advertised BGP routes, as you see here, is it's an AWS hard limit, and there's no way around that. Yeah, thanks, Rick. It's also is called out in the VMware Cloud on AWS configuration maximum guide. We have where are we? We were at 16, weren't we? Yeah, there we go. So the request to increase, we can do it fairly rapidly, up to 40. So we can increase from 16 to 40 within about 24 or 48 hours. Anything more than 40, we actually have to go and justify to AWS. So at that point, as a customer, we would have that conversation, ask you to justify why you need it, and if there was any workaround that we could put in place. But yeah, and then there's a lead time of, I think, 14 working days. So if you hit this, we had a customer hit it mid-migration, unfortunately. And the obviously the challenge there was that they could get away with the 40 increase, so they were lucky, but it halted their migration for 2 days. Had they already been up to 40 and then required more, then it would have halted their migration for kind of 3 working weeks. Potentially 3 working weeks, which is a slightly more bitter pill to swallow. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that, Prasanna. So, Rick, you are my penultimate colleague for the call only.
That's right. No. So what I was about to talk today, I've mentioned already, which was the cloud security assessment. Besides that, maybe one thing I went through with one of my customers just recently. They were, hoping to be upgraded to the very latest build, which we spoke about at the beginning. And since it takes some time for us to go through all the SDDCs to update them, we came up with a plan to actually, have them stand up a secondary SDDC and then migrate everything of the old SDDC to the new SDDC using HDX cloud to cloud. And then this went so smooth and just, I believe it took 1 day to set everything up from the on-premises side and the secondary SDDC, and then took another 2 days for migrating all the workload from one side to the other, and then we could decommission the old SDDC. So when someone is in need of a new feature, which is in the very latest, greatest version of the SDDC, then that's certainly a way to go from and not very current, but still current and supported SDDC version to the very latest and greatest. That's pretty much it for this week.
It's a good point there, actually. So there's some obvious challenges that come into mind when doing an SDDC to SDDC migration of that sort. But it is, as you say, a rapid way of getting the latest and greatest without having to wait for the support maintenance guys to upgrade. Things like additional cost overhead. So I guess you have to work out if the latest and greatest features is cost beneficial, because obviously to deploy another SDDC has at least a 3-node cost impact to you, right? And then as you migrate, I'm going through something similar with a customer at the moment, and they've got one SDDC up here and then another one down here in terms of numbers of hosts. And as they migrate all the VMs from here to here, the first SDDC they're trying to shrink and then use those hosts in the new SDDC, so that their cost impact isn't quite as great. But then they have vSAN storage policies coming into play, and they're going to get to a point where they're running on one vSAN storage policy and they're going to go below 6 hosts and going to have to change it. So there's a bit more planning sort of required when you get lower down in that migration. If you've got, endless money, then it's fantastic, but it's a bit of a management nightmare at the moment. Just something you kind of have to work out, because you don't want to get in the situation where you change your vSAN storage policies and then you autoscaler kicks in and re-adds the host that you're trying to remove, sort of thing.
Yeah, that's absolutely something to look into. So if you have a smaller environment, then it's a pretty straightforward process. But if you have a larger environment, then that certainly takes some consideration and, design, maybe workshop even to, go through all the steps to make sure that your node utilizing too many hosts which are not really needed.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you, Rick. Zach, in the dying few minutes of the call, do you have anything interesting to share with us?
Not super interesting, but regarding
Don't sell yourself short. Don't sell it short. Build it up, Zach. Build it up.
So in the past, port 25 for like SMTP has been throttled, and that's just an AWS default.
Yep, I remember you mentioning that before, actually.
But now, I had a customer that had alerts configured in vCenter to send an email when, like when they had it for the storage. So if the storage got to a certain percentage, they get an email. They stopped getting that. And it turns out now the port is blocked instead of just throttled. But the process is the same. You just open a case with support and give them your org ID and your SDDC, and they'll undo it. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So is there any notification sent that port gets blocked, or do they just stop receiving the emails and they have to question why they're no longer getting emails?
Yeah, I think so. It like changed at some point because they were getting the emails and it wasn't very frequent. So, we weren't worried about it getting throttled. And then they just didn't get the email. And I had to go through and work with the GSS to figure out what was going on. And I guess it's just blocked now. There's a KB article, but it just says throttled. It doesn't say block.
Was there any notification on AWS side of things, or was it literally just blocked and that's it?
As far as I know, there was not any notification or update.
Interesting. Maybe we'll have to look into see if we can get an alert created for that, maybe. So yeah, good one. Cool. Well, thank you for that, Zach. It's always good to know. If anybody has any questions, any further questions in the last couple of minutes of the call, feel free to ask. If not, I thank you all for your time. Thanks for joining. Timmy, thanks for joining again. Good to see you. And
thank you, Will. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. And I'll speak to you all in a couple of weeks.
Perfect. Be safe, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Take care.